Was George Orwell a prophet? Is 1984 actually being lived out in front of us right now?
In 1984, widespread mental disorientation was stimulated via the falsification of history and the negation of the concept of objective truth. The Ministry of Truth was the institution which falsified history.
Let's get ready to rumble! You can't handle the truth.
George Orwell's classic 1984, which talks about life under an authoritarian regime where up is down, down is up, and a ministry of truth has people believing that there's only peace through war and only freedom in slavery. In other words, do not think, do as you're told. We'll tell you exactly what to think, and what we tell you today could change completely tomorrow. But don't question it. Don't even think about it. Just do what you're told. Just days after Elon Musk successfully completed his purchase of Twitter, and a federal judge has turned down a group of nutcases who want to challenge it in court. You can't do that. You can't take our platform away. Now that it's going forward, President Joe Biden has announced the Ministry of Truth. Oh, Jen Psaki doesn't like us calling it that. Apparently, its official name is the Disinformation Governance Board, and it's going to be under the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you, George W. Bush. You were the one that really got the police state rolling in this country. Well, that's because your father, H.W., ex-CIA and globalist. You guys, again, it's not about Democrat versus Republican, left versus right. It's about right versus wrong, them versus us. So this is a gift to us from the political establishment, whether there's an R by their name or a D by their name. If they are part of the swamp, they are part of the oligarch, they are part of the deep state, they are absolutely in complete, total, orgasmic climax that they are to the point now where they will control literally all information. You will not be getting news, you'll be getting propaganda. Now, before we delve into the heaviness of this, AOC, who's always good for a laugh, tweeted out the following. I'm so tired of feeling the stress of the explosion of hate crimes because a billionaire with an ego problem bought her favorite media platform. But Elon Musk wasn't having it, and he tweeted out, hey, I'm really kind of shy. Stop hitting on me. It's classic. It's awesome. It's also a direct shot at AOC, who, wasn't it right around New Year's time when she decided to party down in the state of Florida, completely free and unmasked, and people were pointing out the obvious hypocrisy that her own state and her own district would be masked up, and there would be all types of mandates in place like proof of vaccination and limitation on crowd size. She went down to Florida to just party, and people on Twitter jumped on her for it. And a couple of guys, were talking about the guy that she was there with spending her New Year's weekend. And, it was all done in trolling and in fun. Of course, AOC responds, oh, all you Republicans I already have a boyfriend. Y'all just want to sleep with me. So Elon took the same shot back at AOC. Absolutely classic, very funny. But again, here's what a complete dillweed she is. He hasn't actually taken control of Twitter. So there are no riots or problems that are starting as a result of so-called tweets under his direction or leadership because he hasn't actually taken full control yet. The paperwork is being processed. The money is changing hands. So AOC, dial it down because you are actually disseminating false information. So let's talk about this Disinformation Governance Board. This is Nina Jankowicz. She apparently is going to be the truth czar. I guess it would be better if we said truth Führer, because isn't all this starting to sound eerily familiar to a time in history when Joseph Goebbels, the minister of propaganda, the minister of truth, said, the bigger the lie, the more people that will believe it. And so Nina Jankowicz is being called out over her past dissemination of disinformation. She tweeted back during the presidential election and the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden when Donald Trump tried to bring up the Hunter Biden laptop and what that really meant and Joe's connection to all of Hunter's business dealings. Nina Jankowicz tweeted, "Back on the laptop from hell. Apparently, Biden notes 50 former national security officials and 5 former CIA heads that believe the laptop is a Russian influence op. Trump simply says Russia, Russia, Russia." Well, we now know that whole thing was false when all of those members of the intel community came out and said this is a fake laptop, it's Russian disinformation, yada, 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 yada. Now we find out, oops, no, it actually was Hunter Biden's laptop. He did have all of this stuff on there, everything from him smoking crack naked to messing around with his dead brother's former wife and all of the emails that talked about his business dealings in China and the Ukraine and how the money changed hands, including for the big guy, that would be Joe Biden himself. So she was disseminating false information, but now she is going to be in charge of making sure that on any social media platform, do you understand what this means? This means goodbye to the First Amendment. She is going to determine what is and what is not factual. When Peppermint Patty, Jen Psaki, was asked about this, she gave the classic response. We need to let the experts who are, their expertise is internet disinformation, we need to let them handle this. Well, Nina Jankowicz is an expert. How? On spreading disinformation? What is going to be the result if you tweet out something or you post something on Facebook that they deem as disinformation? Is it a warning? Do you get deplatformed? Do you get censored? Will you be sent to a re-education camp where you will learn how to properly sync and to post? You say, Pastor Marty, don't you think you're just being a little over the top with this? No. The First Amendment was given to protect the speech we disagree with. And now look at what's happening. Look at what is being shoved at us and how we are being programmed into thinking that the limiting of speech actually protects our democracy and our freedom. Do you understand the warped, twisted, backwards, inside-out way of thinking that is? That takes me to the book 1984 and the whole concept of the ministry of truth.
In 1984, widespread mental disorientation was stimulated via the falsification of history and the negation of the concept of objective truth. The Ministry of Truth was the institution which falsified history. Everything faded into mist. The past was erased. The eraser was forgotten. The lie became truth. One of the reasons totalitarian regimes attempt to alter history is because it rids the society of any past reference points or standards of comparison, which might remind the citizens that life in the past was so much better than it is in the sterile and oppressive present. Within 20 years at the most, the huge and simple question, was life better before the revolution than it is now, would have ceased once and for all to be answerable, wrote Orwell.
2 years ago when we were in the midst of the pandemic, and then the summer riots broke out over George Floyd. And then the cancel culture really got ramped up, and we started losing everything from pancake syrup to kids' books written by Dr. Seuss. And see, when you have this cancel culture, what you're really doing, and I said this at the time, and I stand by it, and I have been proven right, it is the erasing of history. Again, something as simple as the Aunt Jemima bottle, the Aunt Jemima logo, Aunt Jemima herself, by removing her image, removing her name, giving it some generic name. What is it called now? Buttermilk Pancake Company, whatever it's called. I don't even know. I don't care. You remove the legacy of a real Black American who was the first one ever of her race in this country to have a product endorsement, who became world famous when she would go to world's fairs and county fairs, etc., and state fairs, and give her demonstration of making pancakes and telling stories about slave life and post-slave life, and literally hundreds of thousands of people saw her live. She became a millionaire in the economy of her time and was able to do much for the advancement of Black Americans in this country. We have completely erased her. And what that means is by erasing that, we don't have a place to point to and say, this is how bad it was. This is when the progress forward began, so that we can show young people today who are convinced, a lot of them, that what's happening right now is even worse than when their ancestors got off slave ships, because they have no point of reference because it's been erased. We can't show any progress. If we erase the norms, all of these, we're just having it barraged at us through TV commercials and in our schools, this whole woke politics of embracing the abnormal as normal, so that there are no norms, so that there are no traditional values, so that we can say it has always been this way. I told you a year ago they had remade through Disney Studios Lady and the Tramp. It's a great animated cartoon. They did a live action version of it. And in watching it, I noticed right away, well, here we are, we're at the turn of the 20th century, slice of Americana. But you could tell you had homosexual characters with homosexual characteristics that were in positions of prominence. You had an interracial married couple who was the owner of Lady. And we know that at the turn of the 20th century, that simply would not have happened. So when they remake Lady and the Tramp again, is it going to be a trans couple that have Lady? And they're doing this on purpose, because what they're trying to do is program young minds into believing that which was abnormal is now completely normal, and we've always thought it's normal. It's only these evil people that used to think that it wasn't normal and it shouldn't have happened. Do you see what they're doing? And so cancel culture, it removes your point of reference.
But another reason history is falsified by totalitarians is to ensure there are no historical roots to which the citizen can anchor and find truth, sustenance, and strength. In totalitarianism, there can be no historical information which contradicts or puts into question the reigning political ideology, nor any institution, such as religion, which offers the individual a refuge from the influence of the state, and so as Orwell wrote in 1984. Every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book has been rewritten. Every picture has been repainted. Every statue and street and building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. And that process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right.
At the height of the pandemic, when every state was going into lockdown, even a lot of red states, and they were closing churches. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida did a lot to keep his state open, but not initially. People have forgotten that. Not initially. He was going right along with what everybody else was doing and shutting down beaches and shutting down church services and definitely saying, no groups over the size of 50 being allowed to gather. One preacher in the state of Florida, Rodney Howard Brown, said, that ain't happening. He had a church of 5,000. They continued to meet. The sheriff went in there. The state police went in there. And when all eyes of the nation's news media was on this one defiant pastor in Florida who was continuing to potentially subjugate his people to a deadly virus, it was a wake-up call for Ron DeSantis. What are we doing? Why are we closing churches? And so he immediately began the rollback in the repeal. But it started because a church, a man of God, took a stand. And now you've got every Republican governor trying to pretend like he was always like Ron DeSantis and he was always open. But watching the churches close, and I thought, who better to calm people down in a time of panic than the church? And then it dawned on me, they didn't want you calm down. They didn't want you calm down. They wanted to take everything away from you that was a normative distraction. Couldn't go to movies, couldn't go to the gym, couldn't go to sporting venues. Everything stripped away. They wanted you in fear because when you're afraid, fearful people can be manipulated. They can be controlled. And look at what's happening now. We're losing our point of references to where I'm telling you it's gaining real steam, and you are going to see in our country our founding no longer declared as July the 4th, 1776. No, nay. The 1619 Project will be declared as the actual founding of America when the first slave ships rolled in here. And obviously we're a racist country, so therefore it's not just about removing Confederate flags and Confederate statues, but even some of our so-called American heroes like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, who, by the way, was a flaming liberal, but they owned slaves. They all got to go. It's all racist, and we need to tear up our Constitution because it was all written by slave people. They're removing your points of reference.
Along with destroying or falsifying the past, widespread mental disorientation is further cultivated by destroying the belief in objective truth. This is done through a program of psychological warfare. Incessant and intentionally confusing propaganda, conflicting reports, and blatant lies are pumped out in official reports and through the mass media at all hours of the day. What is said today has no bearing on what may be said tomorrow, for as Orwell explained, the totalitarian state sets up unquestionable dogmas, and it alters them from day to day. It needs the dogmas because it needs absolute obedience from its subjects, but it cannot avoid the changes which are dictated by the needs of power politics.
Yes, it's not about accurate information. It's not about truthful information. It's about dogma, the dogmatic. Do not question COVID policy. Doesn't matter that the mandates change from day to day. Put the mask on, take the mask off, put them back on. Never had to prove any science behind any of the things that they actually did. Don't question what happened on January the 6th. If you do, don't question what's our position on Russia, Ukraine. Russia, bad. Ukraine, poster child of democracy. We'll give you a strike. We'll pull your channel down. We'll put you in Facebook jail. It has been so decreed by the Ministry of Truth.
In addition, contradictions, hypocrisies, and lies form the foundation of the totalitarian ideology. The totalitarian system presents the enslavement of the individual as his or her liberation. Censoring information is called protecting the truth. The destruction of culture or the economy is called its development. The military occupation of other countries is labeled as the furtherance of freedom and peace. In 1984, the Ministry of Peace instigated wars. The Ministry of Truth manufactured propaganda, and the Ministry of Plenty created shortages. On the enormous pyramidal structure of the Ministry of Truth hung the words, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength."
Think about the contradictions. Censorship protects free speech. Look at how many liberals are absolutely screaming about Elon Musk owning Twitter. And we cannot just let people say whatever they want to say. Liberals used to be all about free speech. We're engaged in a war right now that we say is protecting democracy for a dictatorship. And this whole idea that truth changes. There is no absolute truth. Truth is whatever we officially declare it to be. That's why we can now say boys can be girls. And wrong can absolutely be right.
The official ideology abounds with contradictions even when there is no practical reason for them, Orwell explained in 1984. These contradictions are not accidental. The purpose of this all-encompassing program of psychological warfare is to bewilder the mind of the average citizen. For when the citizen is bombarded with contradictions and lies and lives in what Orwell called that shifting phantasmagoric world in which black may be white tomorrow and yesterday's weather can be changed by decree, he or she eventually ceases to know what to think or even how to think. The distinction between up and down, fact and fiction, truth and falsity, is not only blurred, but loses significance. The belief in objective truth disappears, and the average citizen becomes completely dependent on authority figures to feed him ideas, and thus is ready to assent to lies and to believe the most absurd things, so long as those in the political class deem it to be true.
You know what's not taught in our schools anymore? Critical thinking skills. Reactionary skills are what are taught. You see something that's not fair. It's inequality. It's prejudice. It's racist. It's transphobic. It's homophobic. And we are teaching young people to respond to that based on emotion. We validate feelings rather than stand up for truth. You have to validate how I feel about this. So it's not about education. Schools are not about education. I've been saying this for 30 years. It's about indoctrination. They are indoctrinating kids into how to think. Not how to think for themselves, but how to think as they are decreed and mandated and told to think. So we're not going to school anymore for kids to learn reading. They're going there to learn about equity. They're not going there to learn math. They're going there to understand about gender non-binary. They don't want your kids to think. The pandemic shutdowns when the school, for years, teachers used to make fun of homeschoolers and kids in small little Christian schools that they were being educationally deprived, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, they shut the schools down and the teachers didn't want to go back to work because they were too busy, scuba diving and surfing in Cancun. And only time will tell the irreparable damage that was done by kids basically sitting on their couch in their pajamas, Zooming class if they weren't just texting, or all of the inner city kids that don't even have access to any of that, so they got nothing. And do you understand? That's part of the plan. They don't want kids to think. They don't want kids to learn how to think. They want kids to just simply learn to do what they're programmed to do. Because you see, if you're a thinking person cannot be controlled. We need you not to think, so we can tell you exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And you will do it because it's what the experts said. And don't question it, because when you're questioning me, you're questioning science. You're questioning an expert. Now is not the time to do what you feel. It's the time to do as you're told, said Dr. Anthony Fauci. 1984. Huh. Who would have thunk? In 2022.